When thinking about why the Washington Commanders hired David Blough instead of waiting to even see if Mike McDaniel would come in for an interview, it's clear to me that it was time they felt they couldn't waste, and that is what ultimately tipped the scales in favor of David Blough.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network, and I'm David Harrison, your guy on the ground, credentialed member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9, also writing for Commanders on SI, and here with you 5 days a week. Coming up on today's episode, Teryl Austin isn't getting the greatest amount of support as a defensive coordinator candidate in Washington, but he's not all that bad. And first, we're going to start off with a debate over whether or not the Commanders jumped the gun on hiring David Blough without so much as even interviewing Mike McDaniel. All that coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is in playoff mode, and every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is going to give customers even more ways to get in on the action. Go to FanDuel.com to get started today. The Washington Commanders hired David Blough rather quickly in this year's coaching cycle, so quickly, in fact, that some people felt it was just such a knee-jerk reaction and a desperation move to not lose everybody that has been in the room with Jayden Daniels for the first two years of his career. Of course, Cliff Kingsbury and the team agreeing, quote-unquote, to part ways at the end of the season. Tavita Pritchard, former quarterbacks coach of the Washington Commanders, hired away in the season to go be the head coach of the Stanford Cardinal, his alma mater, his program that he's now running there, which leaves basically, from a quarterback perspective at least, I mean, Brian Johnson is still in the building. Offensive pass game coordinator, assistant head coach Anthony Lynn is still around, running backs coach and run game coordinator. But other than that, David Blough was essentially the last guy remaining. And when you look at the Dan Quinn coaching staff, it's been kind of evident since he arrived that he really kind of built this thing to have succession plans built in, especially on the offensive side of things, because he is a defensive-minded head coach, of course. Always going to be confident, always going to be able and willing if it needs to happen. Doesn't necessarily want it to happen, but if it needs to happen to take over the defense, he's capable of doing that, all those types of things. But the offensive side of the ball is the side of the ball that he doesn't have any, coordinating experience, play calling experience himself, those types of things. So I think the succession plan was very important, and it basically became apparent to a lot of people that basically they were just I don't know, calling it desperate is the right word, but basically so, intent on not losing everybody that's been around Jayden Daniels his first 2 years that they went ahead and pulled the trigger on David Blough. And I think that if the thought out there is that is the only reason they went ahead and made that move, it's a big disservice to David Blough. It's a big, assumption to make in the wrong direction. But the question has come up now, especially since Mike McDaniel, former Miami Dolphins head coach, noted, tight bond with Dan Quinn and all this stuff in their history with the Atlanta Falcons, that Mike McDaniel got fired, came out pretty quick that he would consider offensive coordinator positions, wasn't just targeting a different head coaching job, but the predominant thought was that he would probably get head coaching offers, things like that. Well, now he has reportedly accepted the offensive coordinator position for the Los Angeles Chargers. He is still interviewing. He actually interviewed since that news came out for the Buffalo Bills head coaching position. So there is still a possibility that Mike McDaniel ends up a head coach again in 2026. But as soon as the news came out that he has essentially accepted the role as the Los Angeles Chargers offensive coordinator, the questions started really coming in. I've been on multiple radio appearances in the DC area, DMV area this week alone, being asked, why did the Washington Commanders not just wait at least a little bit to see if Mike McDaniel was going to be interested in at least interviewing to be the team's next offensive coordinator? And I really think it has to do with time, right? So January 8th, the Dolphins fire Mike McDaniel. January 10th, the Washington Commanders promote/hire David Blough to be the next offensive coordinator. So it's a fairly quick turnaround, but 48 hours is a lot of time. And listen, I don't want to get anybody in trouble, and I'm not even so I want to be very clear here that I'm not saying this is what happened, but just understand, just like in your business, just like in my business, just like in everybody's business, in every walk of life, human beings, we do things sometimes that they cross into the gray. Sometimes they cross into the black. They don't stay in the white. We cross the line completely. I'm not telling you it happened, but there's a very real possibility that Dan Quinn and Mike McDaniel had a little conversation after Mike McDaniel was fired. Now let's be clear. Like, once Mike McDaniel was fired, like, there is no like tampering. There's no like all this stuff kind of goes away, right? So I don't even know if there's any rules necessarily being broken. And if Dan Quinn and Mike McDaniel have a conversation and Mike is like, hey, DQ, like, bro, I love you. Would love to come interview and all this stuff. But I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to go on head coaching opportunities or interviews. I'm going to go on offensive coordinator interviews. I'm going to just kind of slow roll this thing. I'm not just going to jump in like I love you, you're my dog, but I'm not going to just jump into another position. I'm going to make my decision on my own time, because that's exactly what it looks like he's done. Mike McDaniel interviewed the week of January 12th with the Detroit Lions. He interviewed the week of January 16th with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, ends up accepting reportedly the Chargers offensive coordinator job on January 20th. But then even after that, he interviews with the Buffalo Bills. So here we are 2 weeks removed from the Washington Commanders hiring David Blough, and Mike McDaniel has quote unquote made a decision, but he also hasn't really quite made a decision, right? And even part of that decision, people are talking about him going to Los Angeles because he wanted to be back on the West Coast. His wife is from California. They met while they were both working in California. Like, you know what I mean? So it just kind of seems like a move where he wanted to relocate his family back to the West Coast. And clearly, as you know, Washington, D.C., Ashburn, Virginia, Landover, Maryland, not the West Coast, right? So, like, as much as I love DQ, I love my wife more if I'm Mike McDaniel, probably. And she wants me back on the West Coast. I want to be back on the West Coast, right? So like these conversations could have very well happened in that 48-hour window. And you can call that an interview. You can call it a conversation. You can call it whatever you want, but there's nothing saying that conversation didn't actually happen. So I think the first point we have to understand is we don't know that Dan Quinn and Mike McDaniel didn't have a conversation. Also, when you look at, again, the plan of succession, the desire to keep someone around Jayden Daniels who knows where Jayden Daniels has come from. I think it's incredibly important because we talk all the time about quarterbacks, especially young quarterbacks, having to relearn different systems. David Blough has been here all 2 years. Jayden Daniels has been here. So David Blough is also a former NFL quarterback. So he knows the actual impact. Like, we can talk about what we think the impact is. We can hear other quarterbacks talk about what the impact is, all that kind of stuff. David Blough has done this. He's bounced from system to system. He knows what that difficulty brings with it, and he knows where Jayden Daniels is coming from. So if David Blough completely rewrites the language of football for Jayden Daniels in 2026, he's going to be doing it because he believes, from knowing Jayden for 2 years, that he can handle it and that he can learn it. He can do those things. I think the reality of it is David is going to try to take what Jayden already knows and does and build on it and change not the entire language, right, but change the dialect. I think is the best way to use this analogy, which is what we wanted to see Cliff Kingsbury do in the first place. So you have a coach here in David Blough who not only knows Jayden, but he knows the Cliff Kingsbury system, not just from coaching the last 2 years, but remember, David Blough was in Arizona under Cliff Kingsbury for a period of time as well. So he knows it as a player, as a quarterback as well. And then he has all these other influences, Ben Johnson, right? Kevin Stefanski, Todd Monken, Freddie Kitchens, right? And some of them are better than others. Jeff Brom, right? He has all these other influences that he can then pull from, which we've also seen him pull from in history in some of these plays over the course of the past 2 years. So I think that's where the real value in David Blough comes in. And when it comes down to it, and yes, the Lions had showed interest as well. And if you're David Blough, if you're going to be a first-year play caller, man, you need to get on the ground running. Like, you need to get to developing. In fact, I would imagine David Blough has already been developing his own offense for his first run as an offensive coordinator, even before he got this job or would have gotten the Detroit Lions job. But if you're Dan Quinn and David Blough, you want to get this thing rolling as soon as possible, because when the players come in April 20th for the offseason program to start, if you're Dan Quinn, you want David Blough to be able to stand there. And if you're David Blough, you want to be able to stand there and welcome your offensive players in and say, hey, guys, I'm David Blough. Nice to re-meet you. Let me reintroduce myself as your offensive coordinator. Here is who we are going to be as an offense right now. And in 2026, Jayden, other quarterbacks, whatever, other players give their feedback, Terry McLaurin, et cetera. Let's figure out who we're going to be from here. This is our starting point. This is our base offense. Now let's customize this thing and let's start working on this thing. And 2 weeks in the time of getting an offense ready, of getting an offensive plan ready, getting a playbook ready, all these things, 2 weeks is a long, long time. And mind you, like I said, it's been 2 weeks and Mike McDaniel has not solidified his job yet. Like, Mike McDaniel hasn't actually agreed at the time of this recording anyway to actually be, he's agreed, like, I will be your coach if I'm not anybody else's head coach, right? But like, that's basically the extent of this thing. So he's not in the building in Los Angeles putting his offense together yet either. That time is incredibly valuable. So I think that's really what it basically boiled down to was a time thing, right? Plus, David Blough, could he become an NFL head coach in the future? Absolutely. Isn't going to happen in 2027. If it does, ladies and gentlemen, we're celebrating a Washington Commanders Super Bowl because it's the most historic first year as a play caller, offensive coordinator in the history of the NFL. Because David Blough, even if they do really well, I would be very, very surprised if he got hired as a head coach after 1 year of being a play calling offensive coordinator. And again, that'd be a great problem to have because the system you've just come through has been very, very successful. So that's my thought. Those are my thoughts on did they have a knee-jerk reaction hiring David Blough before even talking to Mike McDaniel? I'm going to go no, because for one, I don't actually know they didn't talk to Mike McDaniel in the first place. Now, talk about reactions. The news that came out at the end of the week here that Teryl Austin, Pittsburgh Steelers defense coordinator, is interviewed for the Washington Commanders defensive coordinator job, has drawn quite the reaction. We're going to dive into it coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life this year. TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day and your life. And with TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours and hours of your life trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online, and they'll handle everything from W-2s to self-employment forms and work to get you every deduction possible. And you can upload your documents, go about your day, get your updates right in the TurboTax app, and live a little bit stress-free. It's a huge time saver and gives you real peace of mind knowing that an expert is handling your taxes. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, and to the everydayers, those of you come through for every single episode, a special thank you for coming through for yet another one today. And thank you to everybody out there for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network in the world. If you haven't already, please go check out the all-new Everydayer Club, lockedoncommanders.supercast.com. You go there and you got two tiers. You got a membership tier. You got an all-access tier. Members, you're getting ad-free episodes. You're getting access to the Discord server. It's meant to be kind of like a community group chat. We're trying to get this thing rolling. Obviously, the program is new. We're in the offseason, but get in there. Let me know what you're thinking. I'm in there as well. I'll react to you. We'll have conversation. It'll be a nice little group chat of Commanders fans and then myself interacting in there. The all-access tier, you get that, but you add on special bonus episodes and recordings that I'm going to send to you, a bonus newsletter. You also get a discount to the Locked On merch store and more coming down the pike later on. Again, lockedoncommanders.supercast.com to check that out today. Teryl Austin, Pittsburgh Steelers defensive coordinator, has interviewed with the Washington Commanders for their open defensive coordinator position. That information I was able to confirm with a source familiar with the news. So that happening here at the end of the week. Played one season in Washington, 1988, Teryl Austin did, but then has a very extensive history in the NFL as a coach. Is a little bit of a, prioritizing splash plays, bend, don't break type of history to him and to his philosophy. He definitely prioritizes getting turnovers over ensuring that teams are going to get shut out, right? Like he doesn't really, it's kind of reminds me a little bit of the Al Harris pedigree, where we're going to go all out on turnovers, trying to get takeaways. But because of it, we also know we're going to give up some splash plays. We're going to give up some big yards, and we're going to give up some scores. He got a little bit of frustration from Steelers fans. I shouldn't say a little bit. There's a lot of frustration from Steelers fans. If you go on social media, you're going to see a lot of Steelers fans out there talking about Teryl Austin and begging teams to hire him away, which typically is not a great indicator that you're pursuing the right guy, right? Like I don't necessarily go to the point where like GMs and head coaches looking for candidates should just be listening to fan bases, but there is kind of a group think type of mentality here when an entire group of people is sad to see a coach go. Typically means you probably got a pretty good hire, right? Like you think Detroit Lions and Ben Johnson, they were doing everything in their power to try to, I saw fans reaching out to Ben, trying to be like, hey, Ben, please read this message, man. We love you. Stay in Detroit, do these things, and all these other things. That's a pretty good sign that you're probably getting a coach. Because again, it's kind of like the 10 dentist type of situation, right? Like 9 out of 10 fans love this coach. There's probably a good reason. Doesn't guarantee anything, but there's probably a good reason. Well, it seems like 9 out of 10, maybe 9.5 out of 10 Steelers fans, because I actually have seen one in the mix here and there who don't think Teryl Austin is a bad defensive coordinator. But about 9 to 9.5 Steelers fans out of 10 think that Teryl Austin is just terrible. Checking out the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter does a really great job covering the Steelers over there. He's also identified some of the struggles and some of the frustrations with Teryl Austin. He became known for allowing 12-play drives that even if they end in a field goal, you're keeping your offense on the sideline and you're just wearing down your defense. It might sound a little bit familiar to Washington Commanders fans, so obviously you're not going to want to repeat that just a little bit. Fans get really frustrated, and this is why I say, like, you can't just listen to the fan base, obviously, but fan base, the Pittsburgh Steelers fan base gets a lot of angst, gets a lot, really angsty when talking about soft zone coverage. I think he runs soft zone coverage, one, just at all, two, way too much. But the film actually shows, and the breakdown shows that he runs man quite a bit. And the issue there is do you know your personnel? Are you running man coverage with man corners, or are you running man coverage with guys who need to be in zone, so on and so forth? In 2014 was really probably the best year he had as a defensive coordinator with the Detroit Lions. Ultimately had the number 2 overall total defense, number 1 run defense, only allowing less than 70 yards per game in rushing yards, which is great. However, from that point in 2014, statistically, the Detroit Lions then faded every single year, especially after Ndamukong Suh left the organization. Only spent 1 year with the Cincinnati Bengals, was fired mid-season. So it's not the greatest resume builder for him, right? Was the first defense in the Super Bowl era there to allow 500 plus yards in 3 consecutive games. You don't love that, right? You don't love that. And so that basically is how he left Cincinnati and then going to Pittsburgh. However, in Pittsburgh, he was able to kind of come in and resurrect a defense that wasn't all that great. But then again, kind of the same thing that you saw in Detroit, where you had this hot start from an employment standpoint. And then from there, things just kind of regressed to the point where the Pittsburgh Steelers ended up this last season as one of the not so good defenses in the NFL. To a point where honestly it was a little bit surprising to watch Pittsburgh Steelers football from time to time. Now, again, they ultimately made the playoffs, made the postseason, won the AFC North. But of course, most people are going to agree you won the AFC North in a year where everybody in the AFC North was down. You just happen to be not as down as the rest of the division was. The Philadelphia Eagles can understand that feeling with the NFC East this year. The Washington Commanders winning the NFC East in 2020 is a similar type of situation, right? That's basically the story of the Pittsburgh Steelers this year, and just kind of furthermore the decline of the Teryl Austin defense there in Pittsburgh, which has left a lot of the fans and some of the media, including Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers, basically saying that, it's probably time for a change in Pittsburgh, and it's probably time for a change even for just Teryl Austin. So Teryl Austin, the latest candidate. I don't know how much stock I put in the potential of him actually getting the job, to be quite honest with you. If the smoke starts to billow out more, obviously, I will let you know. But I'm also going to tell you that, just like I said, you can't just go off of fan reactions, because there is some good to look at in Teryl Austin's history, and we're going to do that coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by Game Time. The NFL season is wrapping up to an end, but you know what? There's other sports getting up into full swings. There's other comedy events, concerts, shows, all kinds of things happening around you, and there's nothing quite like being at the event live. The crowd noise, the energy, the cheering alongside other fans. Obviously, if it's like a show, like a play, hopefully the cheering is well-timed and fits in with the program. But watching at home, it's great. Being in the stadium, being in the arena, being in the building, wherever it is, it just hits a little bit different. But the frustrating part about doing that has always been and continues to be getting tickets. Even with technology, now it's the queues. Now it's the dealing with logins. Now it's the prices changing right when you get to checkout. You think you got a good deal, you get to checkout, and boom, you got fees, you got all this other stuff. Game Time gets rid of that. It's the app that gives the advantage back to you. It's the hack for unlocking amazing tickets, amazing experiences, all with just a few taps. You pull up the Game Time app, you check out what's going on in your area, and you can find great tickets almost instantly. One of my favorite features is being able to see the view from your seat before you even buy the ticket, so you know what you're getting with those tickets that you're buying. You also have zone deals that stand out. You pick the section of the seating, Game Time picks the seats, and then you save even more. So take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today and get back to being there live. Today's episode is also brought to you in part by FanDuel. FanDuel has been in playoff mode, continues to stay in playoff mode because every day during the NFL playoffs, including championship weekend coming up this weekend, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users, you get a profit boost pack waiting for you inside the app. Every single game day, you're going to see a pack in the app with multiple profit boosts that you can then apply to the bets that you like the most. You open your profit boost pack first thing on game day, see which boosts you like, see which bets you want to apply them to, and those boosts let you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're back in momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. Those boosts give you more juice to your bets that you already like instead of trying to force you into bets that they picked for you. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. So make your picks and apply your profit boost. Go to FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost packet every single NFL playoff game day. Teryl Austin, if you look at social media and the news that Teryl Austin has been interviewed by the Washington Commanders to be the next defense coordinator, the reaction is not so great. Diving into the Locked On Steelers podcast with Chris Carter, the host of the Locked On Steelers podcast, again, does a great job. Definitely one of the guys I trust the most with his analysis and opinions and everything else on this network. It's not been great. It's not been great. Just being right up there up front with you. Not going to try to sugarcoat this at all. However, there have been some positives, okay? The NFL's worst run defense in 2021 was the Pittsburgh Steelers, 32nd in the league in 2021 when Teryl Austin came in, improved to top 10 in year one in 2022. Now in 2025, there were still some goods, right? 10th in points, 8th in yards, 4th in run defense. So that's part of the reason the Pittsburgh Steelers were successful. Like I said, there were some down moments for the Pittsburgh Steelers defense this year for sure, but there's also some good, like I said. And basically the way that we're looking at Teryl Austin is a little bit like Patrick Graham. He's a floor raiser. He's going to give you an operational defense. Is he going to give you a great defense that you can just run to the championship with by itself? Not necessarily, but he's going to give you a solid defense that you can win with if you have an offense that can go out there and put up points, which of course is what David Blough is there to do, Jayden Daniels, things like that. And I think most importantly, when you look at the list of candidates that the Washington Commanders have gone after, for the most part now, you do have guys, Carl Scott, Al Harris, who's yet to interview, but has been requested to interview with the Washington Commanders. Those two guys have very little experience, no play calling experience, no coordinator experience in their history, things like that. The other candidates, guys like Brian Flores, before he agreed to go back to Minnesota, guys like Patrick Graham, even Joe Cullen, who has 1 year of defensive coordinator experience, but a lot more years in the NFL as a position coach, things like that. Jonathan Gannon, right? These are all guys that have a lot of experience. And yeah, it does point to Dan Quinn wanting someone to come in who has experience that he can kind of trust to run his ship. And I think that's smart. That would be smart. We talk about this every day, as you know this. It would be smart for Dan Quinn to have an experienced defensive coordinator because he has an inexperienced offensive coordinator. However, you can't just go get a guy who has experience for the sake of getting a guy who has experience, and you end up bringing in a dude that's just going to do the same thing, over and over. Like someone recently made a point that, sometimes you hire experienced guys and they suck. Sometimes you hire inexperienced guys and they blow up. There's no one way to go about it, right? That at the end of the day, you got to make sure you get the right person. So when you look at Teryl Austin, what you like about him, obviously, like I said, as a floor raiser, is that he doesn't just run the same thing over and over again. In 2018, Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator's position, 40% man coverage. And with Pittsburgh from 2023 to 2025, that went to about 55 to 60% zone coverage. So some similar numbers there, but he has been known to switch from man to zone depending on what his secondary can do. So if he identifies that his secondary can't play man, and he's not a D coordinator who's just going to sit there in man coverage for 5 weeks and say, hey guys, just go figure it out. No, eventually he's going to come to that resolution faster, or that realization, I should say, faster, that, hey, my guys aren't doing this. Let's flip this and let's do this differently. He went from 61% two high safety looks in Cincinnati to 57% single high safety looks with Pittsburgh, based on personnel, trying to maximize the personnel. His blitz rate jumped from 20% in Cincinnati to 31% in Pittsburgh in 2025. So again, getting more aggressive because it seems to fit his personnel better. So you at least like that about him as well, that he's going to make some adjustments based on what his defense is showing him. If his defense is showing him that we can't do this, then he's not going to just keep doing what they can't do in hopes that they just magically figure it out and start to get better at it. So you like that kind of a thing. His run defense is probably the most attractive part about him. He's had a history of showing that he can fix a run defense early, had some success in Detroit, Pittsburgh, all that stuff, but he's not going to come in and run this like super disguise heavy, super, confusing type of defense. He's going to need players to go out there and make plays. His star players are going to need to show up. Guys like TJ Watt have really helped him out over the years, things like that. So again, in that way, he's a lot like a Patrick Graham, where he kind of has his way, but he'll mold and shift within the way that he likes to do things. But again, he's going to need some star players to go out there and make plays as well. So I get it. Not a super sexy candidate, all that kind of stuff, but another candidate nonetheless, and another guy to watch for this Washington Commanders job as we get closer and closer to that happening. Again, like I said, I think the Seattle Seahawks potentially losing this weekend could have a big impact on what the Washington Commanders do. At the end of the day, if nothing, it allows them the opportunity to bring Carl Scott into the building to interview him formally and then go from there. So that's going to do it for this episode. A look, again, my conversation about why the Washington Commanders maybe went with David Blough over having an official interview with Mike McDaniel, and our first look at Teryl Austin, who is interviewing Pittsburgh Steelers defense coordinator, interviewing for the Washington Commanders defense coordinator position, or is already interviewed, I should say. Coming up next time on Locked On Commanders. First of all, there is a storm coming, and I'm going to do my best to continue producing at the clip that we have been producing, because that's what I want to do, and I hope that's what you want me to do. But weather obviously is going to dictate a little bit of that. If I lose power, then obviously there's going to be a little bit of a hitch. But I'm doing some things, putting some things in place to hopefully be able to cover that in case it happens. So stick with me. But in the meantime, also make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Commanders so you get all the latest episodes. You can also follow me on X at DHarrison82, on Instagram at DHarrison_82. And if you never miss an episode, that means you're an everydayer. And that means the Everydayer Club is literally built for you. LockedOnCommanders.supercast.com to check out the Everydayer Club today. For your next listen, check out Locked On NFL twice per day on YouTube or on audio. Episodes are dropping on the entire national landscape of the league. To the Everydayers, I see you. I appreciate you every single day. And I thank you again for coming through yet again today. Until next time, everybody out there, please stay safe, be kind to one another. We will talk again real soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.